Welcome to Hannah's Heart.
So Hannah, she's just one of the women who did struggle with infertility in the Bible.
No matter who we are, we can be inspired by the fact that Hannah took her pain to God, and God heard her and was with her.
So when she was praying at the temple, she had been weeping and not eating, and her lips were moving, but her eyes were closed, and the priest was like, "Hey, why are you drunk at the temple?"
It can become an obsession when you want a child so deeply.
And desiring that baby and to be a mama. Every holiday, every Mother's Day.
This is not a show that's going to promise you a certain outcome, but this is a show that says, however God answers your cry, we know that He's enough.
Hey, I'm Ann.
And I'm Kendra.
And thank you for listening to Hannah's Heart today. You can always find us on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube. And coming soon to the streaming platform, you can see us on there and listen to us. You can also email us at hannahsheart@afa.net. We've been getting a little bit more emails here lately, just with prayer requests and testimonies and some ideas for shows and things like that. So we really appreciate getting ideas from you guys. So keep them coming.
And we love to pray with you. This show is for anyone who's struggling with infertility, has gone through a miscarriage, or you're wanting to build your family through adoption. We know that children are a blessing from God and a natural desire to have, and we want to walk with you through that journey and that process.
That's right. So we have a special guest today in the studio. Her name is Abby Young, and she is someone I have not gotten to know her well personally. She knows a lot more about me than I do know about her, but she is very involved in the foster care world and is very passionate about foster care and the kiddos that are in our community and really around everywhere in America. But she does so much for our community and the kids here and the families here. So we're excited to get to know Abby today. Abby, we're glad to have you.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. A little bit nervous, but excited.
You're going to kill it.
Yeah.
You're going to kill
You're
it.
Good.
Just
You're
a quick note for anybody who's listening who struggles with infertility. We've talked about this before on the show, but fostering and adoption is not a Band-Aid for that feeling of desiring to have a biological child. But we have seen time and time again that God works in such creative and beautiful ways. Right. And often He does lead couples to go this path.
Right.
And that's why we're having Abby on today.
That's right. That's right. So Abby, if you don't mind just telling us a little bit about you and maybe what your job description is, things like that.
Okay. So I have worked with children for a really long time. I am a social worker and started out my career at Child Protection Services in Mississippi and went from there into several different avenues. I've done some community mental health practice with children in the elementary schools. And from there, I worked in the youth court system along with our local youth court judge. I was her designee, so I was kind of her right hand and her liaison between she and Child Protection Services. I coordinated the court and worked to make sure information flowed as well as possible between the two entities. Now I work for Child Protection Services in Mississippi, and I try to do my best for all the children in Mississippi, but primarily in the northeast part of the state.
Wow. Wow. You're a busy lady. Very, very busy. You mentioned before the show started how many kids you were responsible for?
We have, I think it's between 600 and 700 just in the northeast corner of the state. But when you're talking about Mississippi, we're looking more like 3,600 for the state of Mississippi.
Goodness gracious. Wow, that's heartbreaking.
It's a decrease overall, so we are making some strides to help families on the front end prior to taking custody. So the numbers are improving in terms of trying to decrease the number of children that have to come into care.
Okay. So what does that, can you describe to us what that looks like on the front end?
Yeah, so we're actually doing a whole lot more here over the next couple of years than we've done in the past even. But our goal is to create community supports that are sufficient to meet the needs of families before a removal is required. So ultimately, we never want to rip a family apart. If we can keep the family together and support them in whatever way they need it. That's our ultimate goal, is to keep them together. Regretfully, that's not always possible, but we're talking about things like true services that are needed for addiction. That's probably our primary reason for bringing children into custody. I don't think that we are unique with that fact in Mississippi. I think that's a pretty widespread issue, is needing quality addiction services for families with children. I think we also do a lot to educate the community with parenting classes and things like that.
That's awesome.
So not just parenting, but also conflict resolution and working to figure out relationships within the family and what they need to keep things together and promote positive relationships. So more services like that on the front end before we have to be involved, and trying to educate the community to make reports before the problem occurs. And is there a way that we can plug them in somewhere before the issue comes up?
Okay. I was wondering, so when the people that are doing this work, are these social workers? Like, who is providing these services?
The services are provided by a number of people. So some of these are nonprofits, some of these are for-profits, some of them are social workers or professionals very specific to their field. In this area, we have community mental health, and then we have for-profit mental health providers. Those are all very helpful and also help with addiction. We have some addiction services in the area that we refer to regularly that are nonprofits. So a little bit of all things.
Gotcha. Well, I love that idea. Is that something that just started since you got there?
It's an idea we've always had. We always need to put the families together, but we have a lot of new initiatives. We have new administration in state office who is working very hard to decrease maltreatment in care, and working really hard to decrease the number of reports that we screen in, if we can address those issues outside of foster care. So there's a lot of development of new programs where we see gaps or holes in the services that we currently provide. And hopefully over the next couple of years, we'll have an increase in those services that we can provide to people and to families, and we'll overall see a continued decrease.
Wow, yeah.
So when you talk about, Mississippi being a reunification state, and you're talking about helping to prepare biological parents to be better at what they do. A lot of people that listen to this show maybe have gone through the foster care program to be foster parents. And I know a lot of foster, the first thing in your mind is, I think I could do a better job. I want to help these kids and rescue them. But yet there is so many positive benefits to helping the biological family unit. Can you help us understand, like, how do you prepare?
It is so hard. Because when you really think about, we are a government agency that goes in and takes someone's child from them and places them with somebody we've identified as being great. And they are.
Right.
And so that's so hard for a biological family to look at and say, well, they said they're better than me. That's an automatic turnoff for a family, and so difficult. Yet we look at that foster parent and we educate them and talk to them and expect that they co-parent with these people, with these biological parents.
So what are, like, the benefits to the child of being connected to that biological family?
Well, there are a lot of benefits, especially when we're talking about decreased trauma to the child. When you have two sets of parents that are working together well, it decreases the trauma to the child overall. The child sees that both my foster parents and my birth parents love me, and one is not pitted against the other.
It's not a duel.
Yes. So it decreases the number of maladaptive behaviors each child has in those foster homes. It improves the quality of the visitation when you go see the birth parents again. And it promotes trust in both the foster home and the birth family home, so that the child trusts whatever caregiver is in place at that time. And knows who to go to when they need something, or who they can get help from, or who they can trust to care for them.
Yeah. from our experience with working with one of the birth moms that we were involved with, it was her trust of us went up whenever she saw us like, hey, we're not trying to take them away. We're not talking bad about you.
We're in your corner. We're rooting for you.
Right. And so, yeah, that's how we still, I feel like, have a relationship with her today, and her coming to my little girl's first birthday party and bringing the kids, And so I do feel like as foster, at least I'm saying this for us, as a foster family, it is hard. It's awkward. Especially those initial visits, because then you walk in too and you're like, are you looking at me like I'm trying to be better than you? Because that's not my heart in this.
Especially if your perspective is that you've struggled with infertility and you just desperately want a child to be yours. Yeah. You have to deal with that emotion of, I want something permanent. Yeah. And this is not a permanent situation.
Right. It's not meant to be. Right. That was something, Abby, calling you. And I think I remember our first conversation, and just something weird had happened with visits or something. And one of our kiddos had to go to the hospital, and you talked me through it. You told me things I didn't want to hear, because you're like, honey, you're supposed to be rooting for the family right now. Like, this baby belongs to biological family as of right now. And so, but that was so good for me to hear, because I did need that reminder that, like, you do not get into foster care to adopt at first. It just, from our experience, I know of some situations where the family got this baby and like biological parents weren't even a question. Like, they were out of the picture. This baby was going to be adopted. But for the most part, you're in this for reunification when it can happen.
Right. So there is a time frame that is required for reunification to be the plan for every family. Yeah. So in the state of Mississippi, the plan cannot be changed to adoption until 6 months at the very earliest, and most judges don't really consider it until you're talking more like 1 year mark. Yeah. So there is a time where it is absolutely expected that that's what we're working on. But it is hard for foster families. Even if they don't go in thinking, I'm going to adopt in this situation, it's still hard to work with a birth family who, at some point has in some way harmed this child that you now care so deeply for. Right. How fair is that on any side of it? Yeah. But in the name of the child, and in knowing the trauma that comes with a mistrusting relationship, it is really helpful to co-parent if at all possible.
And that's for the sake of the child, not the parent, not the biological parent.
I think that we do see, and I think that we can show that reunification rates increase dramatically when we do have a co-parenting relationship. And I think, Anne, in your first situation with the two children you had that we're talking about, I believe wholeheartedly that your attitude toward it and how much you worked with her and the care that you showed Mama had played a huge role in how diligent she was to work to get them back, and her ability to do so. It increases the support system all the way around, when a lot of them don't have good support systems when they come in, and so when the foster parent or family is able to rally around them and be that support system for them, they have a much higher likelihood of reunification.
Right. This mom that we're talking about, I love her like family now. And her kiddos, love them like my kiddos. And I think she's okay that I feel that way. But she and the kids came back for Easter, and she even said, I've never seen food like this before, And so many times you wonder what the biological parent has experienced, were they a child deserving of a different life, of a different home that didn't get it? And so then it's like, how do they then grow up to know how to do better?
Right.
Hey, I've got two sides of an incredibly supportive family, and parenting's hard.
Yes.
It is hard work.
It's hard if you have all the money in the world. It's hard if you don't have all the money. Like, so many things is hard.
But I can't imagine not having that community.
Right.
Do you find, Abby, that you have some foster parents that have reached out to you in anger over situations because they're not understanding kind of the goals, or maybe they're coming from a different, and if so, how do you deal with that?
Absolutely. We get those a lot. But it always comes from a place of love It always comes from a place of, I now have this relationship with this child that I do care so deeply for, and I want what's right and what's best for them. And we put foster parents in a very difficult situation sometimes because we look at them and tell them, you are an advocate for this child. If this child needs to go to the doctor, you take them.
Right.
If this child needs an IEP at school, you take them and you get it and you advocate. We're going to support you through that process. We're going to walk alongside you. We'll go to the meeting if you need us to. But we do expect them to be advocates for our children. And then we turn around and say, but we also need you to do all these other things.
But you're not the mama.
Right. And
Wow.
it's so hard. And I can't imagine being in that spot. And I do have to say the hard thing a lot of times. But every time I've ever gotten that phone call, it absolutely comes from a place of love, even if it's misunderstood. Sometimes our place, CPS's place, or what our role is in it for reunification. But it comes from a place of love. And I think in the end, because of that love, they're able to understand the purpose because if they truly love that child, then they also know that mama, that birth mama loves that child. And so we're able to work through those conversations a lot out of love.
Yeah, yeah. So what drew you to this hard job?
Yeah, very hard job. I'm sitting here thinking about how you must go to bed at night and have like 300 little faces on your mind to have to be connected.
It's interesting. I never thought I would be sitting here in this place or doing this job. I never, this was not, I wasn't sitting in my junior high class writing a paper about how I was going to be a CPS worker one day, But I had to declare a major in college. I wanted to go to law school, and I had to declare a major. I didn't know you had to declare an undergraduate major. So I showed up at freshman orientation and said, okay, well, I want to do family law, so I got to start somewhere. I'll start with social work. I didn't want to get out with a political science degree that I couldn't do anything with if need be. So I went into social work. Still wasn't really sure that that's where I would end up. But I fell in love. I took a child welfare class in college and loved it, and that's where I did my internship. And I knew that's where I would be forever. Even if I was not at CPS, I knew that I would be in child welfare forever. It's just a passion, and when you meet those people that are in the field that are passionate about it, that love it, they're for lifers. Like they are there for the right purpose. Yeah. Yes, it's an investment.
It is.
I've never done foster care. I have through adopted brothers. I've heard a little bit of Ann's stories, but the one thing that I've heard from a lot of foster families is kind of this, the system's so broken and they're overworked and we can't get a hold of people, and a lot of negativity towards
There's a lot of negativity.
the brokenness. Like, how you chose to go into that. First of all,
do you really, is it broken?
Yeah.
What do they mean when you hear the system's broken?
Yeah.
I think collectively what anyone means when we say the system is broken is that a bureaucratic process, a government entity will never, ever, ever replace a mama and a daddy.
Oh, say that again. That was good.
A government agency will never be able to replace a mama and a daddy. And I think in so many ways we're expected to do that, and that's where the role of the foster parent comes in at. But I think that's why it's so broken, because we're using policies and procedures to dictate decisions about a child's life and about their care, and that is such we're wanting those things to replace a personal level of understanding and trust about the care that an individual needs, and we can't do that. And so because of that, over time, I think with all government agencies, things get outdated and we don't stay up to par on where society leads us. I think that culturally and with our society, things change so very quickly that we can't keep up sometimes. I think that in Mississippi, we're making huge strides to retain employees. That's been one of our biggest hurdles long term, and I think that's a hurdle of all child welfare agencies across the nation, is that we struggle to maintain employees because of the depth of the job, because of how hard it is, because of the rate of burnout. And so
some of the stories you hear, I can't imagine that being my job, to go remove this child from this home,
Yeah, and then build that relationship back to put them back.
Right.
Or tell them, this is how we need to work together. But yeah, I do think it's broken in a lot of ways. I do think that there are ways we can improve it, and it just takes a whole lot of time to get there. So in Mississippi, I will tell you that our salary structure has increased dramatically, which is something that's been needed for a long time. We have a commissioner who is absolutely invested in our children. Wow. She's invested in our frontline workers and knows that that is where the heart of the agency is, and that is where we need to invest our time and our energy. And so she's doing that to help retain workers, and I see a lot of positive effects coming from that. So a lot of the things that you hear from foster parents about the struggles and the lack of communication comes from a low workforce in comparison to our caseloads. Yeah. That's the age-old excuse and explanation. I tell people all the time I have excuses and I have explanations. Sometimes they make you feel better and sometimes they don't. But overall,
because from the foster family's perspective, there's this like maniacal person sitting on their paperwork, just like eating potato chips, like
nobody's doing this,
nobody's doing anything. Is
exactly
the vibe that they think.
Yes, I will tell you that over there, we work very, very hard and very long hours, and there's just a lot to be done.
So how can our churches get involved?
I would say this is something I'm extremely passionate about. I have no doubt, like for myself personally, I can see how the Lord led me right into this. It was not somewhere I planned to be, but I see His plan for my future, and I know exactly how I got here. And I think that the church as a whole has a huge responsibility in caring for our orphans and widows, just as He commanded. And I think my personal opinion is that I think that we need commitment from the churches. I don't think it needs to be a 1 month focus that we turn around and talk about maybe again next year or when it feels good. But these are hard conversations. These are hard times. These are hard issues to address. It's very hard for us as a church to see the hard things and to do the hard things sometimes.
So commitment to like support foster families and
commitment to support foster families, commitment to support the frontline workers, commitment to support the children. There's a lot of talk about what we can do this month or the next month or how we can donate to this cause or that cause. And all those things are helpful and excellent and awesome, and we need every bit of that. But sometimes it ebbs and flows. And so I think that long-term commitment from everyone on board is the best thing.
For sure. Okay. Well, that's really neat. What do you feel like if a Christian says, I'm not called to be a foster parent, but I want to be involved in foster care somehow? What could that look like?
Absolutely. There are foster parent support groups that you also can be a part of, that you can encourage, that you can get the word out, that you can lead and bring in those people to speak and just commit to those things. There are other programs in the community that support us, those things we refer out for, the parenting classes or the children's advocacy centers in each area are huge and can use support. And locally, our Beds for Kids program is huge, and they've committed to us, and they provide beds for every child we call them about. We're talking hundreds of beds all the time. So supporting those types of programs helps support us. And then supporting our frontline workers is something, just thank you. I'll stop in and say, hey, I wanted to bring you guys lunch today, or let me bring these snacks because we don't get lunch a lot of times.
Really?
So just bring us some snacks to the office and drop them off is awesome. Anything like that is supportive and helpful.
Okay. One thing real quick, I talked to you about this and I really want to do it now, is there's a room in every CPS office that's designated either for visits or when a child does not have a home to go to right now. And I think that is our room here in Tupelo is not very welcoming. And so that has been something on my heart to put down financially and time into to get that looking a little bit better for our kiddos here and the
Sign me up.
families
Let's
here.
do it.
And so if I could encourage anyone across America to check with your CPS office, and if that's all you can do right now is to help get some better looking toys, to go clean
Yes,
the toys,
yes.
clean the room.
Yes.
That's one thing that would
Books.
bother me is taking our little man crawling on the floor at the time into this nasty building. It would drive me nuts that he was having to go do that or play with these toys that someone had just,
Snotted on.
Yeah, just snotted on. Yeah, we can say it like that. And so if there's anything that I could encourage you to do that might feel small, but something that would mean a whole lot, I feel like, to
Yes.
the employees and to the kids.
Absolutely.
Something
That's
like
super
that.
practical.
Yeah.
Well, my heart is just for anyone who's listening who God might be calling them to become a social worker and
Yeah.
go into this darkness.
Right.
And do you think you could pray for Abby and for...
Yeah, so I was this is actually a prayer that I found for this type of thing. So this is blessed are you who let your heart break. You don't have to. You could just have an easily skirted the issue, scrudged it off as someone else's job, but you didn't. You gave the ride or set up the meal train or sat in the waiting room. You handed your precious time over to the inefficiency and exhaustion of tragedy. Blessed are you who show up during someone else's worst day because it's your job. The healthcare worker, the funeral director, the foster parent, chaplain, social worker, pastor, lawyer, police officer, or judge. You have not allowed yourself to be hardened by all that you've seen. You who offer the gift of steady presence amid swirling chaos. Blessed are the communities of care that surround us when we fall apart, knowing we can't do this alone, and trusting that even if we don't have the answers or the right words to say or know exactly what to do, we will continue to show up again and again and again.
Well, thank you guys so much for joining us today, and thank you for listening to Hannah's Heart on American Family Radio.